early in her life. She responded to God's call on her life when she was still a teenager. And it was a missionary's strong challenge to give her life to teaching in India. And it resulted in her eventual appointment to the city of Calcutta. I'm going to move this here right now. Can't see what I'm saying. Some months after she went to Calcutta, she saw a sight that completely changed, revolutionized her life, and would ultimately bring her some worldwide fame. What was it that she saw? It was a homeless, dying woman. Might turn off. Is it not working? No. Anyway, well, let's try this. Sorry. What she saw was a homeless, dying woman that was being eaten by rats. Mother Teresa, the lady who became Mother Teresa, saw this. Compassion, mercy, compelled her to beg the government for an abandoned Hindu temple from the government and convert it to a makeshift hospital for the dying. She said, if there is a God in heaven and a Christ we love, no one should die alone. So this woman established colonies for over 10,000 lepers in 28 cities, and was interviewed by a man named Malcolm Muggeridge on BBC News. And he said, Mother Teresa, the thing I noticed about you and the hundreds of sisters who now form your team is that you all look so happy. Is that a put-on? And she replied, oh, no, not at all. Nothing makes you happier than when you really reach out in mercy to someone who is badly hurt. Mother Teresa, who died in 1997, was the embodiment of mercy and compassion. She and her fellow nuns helped thousands in India and in other places. She never retired, never stopped working until she could no longer stand on her feet. She was 87 years old when she died. And the Secretary of the United Nations said, she is the United Nations. She is the peace of the world. What could cause people to think of someone in that way? The answer is compassion. The answer is mercy. Mother Teresa's actions were so out of the ordinary that the whole world noticed. She understood the mercy of God better than most. She spent almost 50 years in her adopted country of India, actually becoming a citizen. She showed mercy to the lowest class of people in a country where people are ignored at best and abused at worst. Now, I'm not trying to canonize Mother Teresa. The Roman Catholic Church is in the process of doing that right now. What I'm trying to relate is that Mother Teresa, what she did was so unusual that the world took notice. Why did the world notice? What's the big deal? The world noticed because people recognize compassion as a worthwhile human trait. It's nice to be helpful and care about others, right? It's nice. But more than that, however, the world noticed because it was so unusual. It's not usual for someone to show mercy in an unmerciful world. That's why Mother Teresa was so special. That's why people noticed. Now, the Apostle Paul, we just read from chapter 12 of Romans, he did not have the reputation of being a merciful sort of guy before becoming a Christian. When he first is introduced in the book of Acts, his mission is to destroy the church. He watches while young Stephen is killed for his faith, and then he goes on a rampage of harassing, imprisoning, threatening, and probably killing people because of their faith in Jesus. So when Paul said in verse 1 of Romans 12, now, This version said, because of what God's done. The NIV translates that, in view of God's mercy. I really like that. When Paul said that, he knew what he was talking about. God had shown Paul an incredible amount of mercy on that hot and dusty road on the way to Damascus. He had shown Paul mercy in the intervening years, and saving him in shipwrecks and beatings, imprisonments, and even, it appears, at Lystra, they even killed him. Just once, but yeah, he was killed once. So Paul was familiar with mercy, with God's mercy and compassion. He understood his place. He understood that his position as apostle was not a CEO with all the perks and benefits of a high position. He understood that his position was beneath everyone. So to understand mercy that people show others, we need to understand something about God's mercy. Because in all honesty, human beings are not merciful by nature. God is merciful. From the moment of the fall in the Garden of Eden, he has shown mercy to humanity. God's judgment makes payment for man's depravity, for human depravity, but his mercy confronts human suffering and guilt. If there wasn't any guilt in the world, if there was no pain, no tears, God would still be a God of mercy, but his mercy would remain hidden. Human misery brings about God's mercy. To understand God's mercy is not just to understand it in your mind. He obviously showed mercy to many in the scriptures, but we have to realize that God's mercy is endless. It's without bounds. And it's also free through Jesus Christ and available to us in any situation. Accepting his mercy requires belief, though. And we can ask for mercy for our entire lives, but if we don't believe that God is able to extend that mercy, we will starve to death outside the banquet hall of a great wedding feast. When Paul wrote to the Romans, he reminded them of what God had done for the people of Israel, how he showed incredible mercy and grace in his treatment of that rebellious and stubborn people. So in the first verse of Romans 12, he says, "And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all he has done for you, in view of God's mercy." God does not ask us to do anything he would not do for us. The life of Jesus is a reflection of that mercy. Whatever good Jesus did was not because the people he touched deserved it. None of them earned healing or a kind word. They were touched because God is merciful. When we truly understand the depth of the mercy of God, we will then be able to step into showing mercy to others. And that's where Christian compassion enters the picture. Last Sunday, Pastor Cheonan and several others from the congregation went to the Graceville Orphanage here in Cheonan. And they visited some babies. Most of the children in the orphanage are abandoned children. Some of them come from the baby box in Seoul. Are you familiar with the baby box? Mercy compels us to help those in need. Mercy does not come from us, it comes from God. Whenever you feel compassion for another, it's good seeing that person through, it's God seeing that person through your eyes. Jim Cymbala is the pastor, the lead pastor of the Brooklyn Tabernacle in New York City. And Debbie and I have had the pleasure of worshiping there on a number of occasions. It's an amazing place. It's in an old theater, and there's about 4,000 people there on a Sunday for 3 services. It's an amazing place. They have a 300-person choir that's world famous. And they're pretty good, actually. But he tells this story. It was Easter Sunday, and I was so tired at the end of the day that I just went to the edge of the platform, pulled down my tie, and sat down and draped my feet over the edge. It was a wonderful service with many people coming forward. The counselors were talking to these people. As I was sitting there, I looked up the middle aisle, and there in the third row was a man who looked about 50, disheveled. He was filthy. He looked up at me rather sheepishly as if saying, could I talk to you? We have homeless people coming all the time, asking for money or whatever. So as I sat there, I said to myself, though I am ashamed of it, what a way to end a Sunday. I had such a good time preaching and ministering, and here's a fellow who probably wants some money or wine. He walked up and he got within about 5 feet of me, and I smelled a horrible smell like I'd never smelled in my life. It was so awful that when he got close, I would inhale by looking away, and then I'd talk to him and then look away again to inhale, because I couldn't inhale facing him. I asked him, "What's your name?" He said, "David." "How long have you been on the street?" 6 years. "How old are you?" 32. He looked 50. His hair was matted, his front teeth were missing, his eyes were slightly glazed. "Where'd you sleep last night, David?" "In an abandoned truck." I keep in my back pocket a money clip that also holds some credit cards. I fumbled to pick one out, thinking I'll give him some money. I won't even get a volunteer. They're all busy talking with others, and usually we don't give people money. We usually take them for something to eat. But I took the money out. David pushed his finger in front of me, and he said, "I don't want your money. I want this Jesus, the one you were talking about, because I'm not going to make it. I'm going to die on the street." And he said, I completely forgot about David. I started to weep for myself. I was going to give a couple of dollars to someone God had sent to me. See how easy it is? I could make it the excuse that I was tired. There's no excuse. I was not seeing him the way God sees him. I was not feeling what God feels. But did that change, he says. David just stood there, and he didn't know what was happening. I pleaded with God, "God, forgive me, please forgive me. I'm so sorry to represent you in this way. I'm so sorry. Here I am with messages and my points, and you send somebody I'm not ready for." And he said, something came over me. Suddenly I started to weep deeper, and David began to weep. And he fell against my chest as I was sitting there. He fell against my white shirt and tie. And I put my arms around him, and there we wept on each other. The smell of his person became a beautiful aroma. And here's what I thought the Lord made real to me. If you don't love the smell, I can't use you. Because that is why I called you where you are. This is what you are about. You are about this smell. Jesus Christ changed David's life. He started memorizing portions of scripture that were incredible. We got him a place to live. We hired him in the church to do maintenance, and we got his teeth fixed. He was a handsome man when he came out of the hospital. They detoxed him in 6 days. He spent that Thanksgiving at my house. He also spent Christmas at my house. And when we were exchanging presents, he pulled out a little thing and he said, "This is for you." It was a little white handkerchief, the only thing that he could afford. A year later, David got up and talked about his conversion to Christ. The minute he took the mic and began to speak, I said, this man is a preacher. This past Easter, we ordained David. He's an associate minister of a church over in New Jersey. And I was close to saying, here, take this. I'm just a busy preacher. We get so full of ourselves. That's where his story ends. When the world seems to get the best of us, when the world says this is more important or that is more important than caring for others, when we look the other way when we see suffering, we get so full of ourselves. I know better. I know that you care. I know that you have God's mercy and compassion, and I know that it hurts to look the other way. And we think that the problem is too big. What we contribute doesn't matter. Let me tell you something that you may not know. Well, I'm sure you don't know it because I don't share this with very many people. One sentence changed my life. One sentence. And it was just an offhand remark. It was mentioned in a conversation after church one Sunday. It probably took 2 seconds in that person's life to change another life forever. I don't know how many people I have affected, but that person is responsible for that too, whether he realizes it or not. He showed me God's mercy that Sunday morning. I'm not even going to share what he said, because it's actually what he said wasn't important. It's what I did. It's what I did with what he said. Alleviating suffering is not about money. It's about caring. You can even help suffering people even if you are suffering yourself. Yeah, this problem with suffering is huge, but God is bigger than all that suffering. Mother Teresa said, I have found the paradox that if you love until it hurts, there can be no more hurt, only more love. She also said, if you can't feed 100 people, then just feed one. Feeding one or feeding 100 glorifies God. In view of God's mercy, we see his mercy every day. Each breath, each heartbeat, each day, his mercy. Because of that, we can offer ourselves fully to him. And when we do that, we have the opportunity to know what he really wants from us. So we can know what his good, acceptable, and perfect will is. Micah 6:8 tells us specifically what God wants from us. Have you ever asked, what does God want from me? Micah 6:8 says, mercy is a necessary ingredient, by the way. The prophet wrote, he has shown you, O mortal, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? To act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. I can't say it any better than that.
War,
famine,
poverty,
disaster,
they leave millions of victims behind.
and many of them are children.
and so many of them need help.
In so many ways that it's almost beyond imagining.
Can you really make a difference?
Where do you even start?
You start with one.
When you sponsor a child, you provide nutritious meals to feed his body and medicine to heal it.
Which means he's more able to fight disease, grow up healthy, and work.
When you sponsor a child, you give her education to feed her mind which means she has a chance to get out of poverty and contribute to her family and community.
When you sponsor a child, you show them that they're loved by God.
and that they matter.
Millions of children need to have that love,
that hope, the chance for a better life.
So what can you do?
Take one step.
One child sponsored?
is one life changed forever.
I know.
I know.
I know.
I know, because one of you sponsored me. These were the faithful sponsors that sponsored me throughout my elementary and my high school education. I was born and raised in the Philippines. Child sponsorship gave me the opportunity to have a quality education and to be able to dream as high as I can and move forward with my life. It brought me to where I am right now. Sponsorship is future for kids. It just opened a lot of opportunities. Now we can just dream big and be what we want to be.
NCF's Child Sponsorship Program have contributed to what I am doing right now, being a web developer and a graphics designer at World Mission Communication Center. I am blessed because one of you sponsored me.
One of you sponsored me.
One of you sponsored me.
Just to be sponsored means a lot of opportunities. I look back at it and I'm like, if I didn't have that education, I don't even know where I would be at, you know. And child sponsorship did that for me. It opened that door for me.
I have had the opportunity to meet some of the former sponsored children who are now grown. And it has been so powerful talking to them. And I've asked them, as far as if you could meet your sponsor or talk to your sponsor, what would you say to them? And they said, I can't even express how thankful I am. They are my family. And so to you, it may seem like you are just doing something very small, sending 82 cents a month. But to them, you are their family. And we've met children who are grown now, who they carry the picture of their sponsored child and a letter that they received years ago in their pocket. And they have shown us it, and it is all torn and falling apart. But that's how much you mean to them, is that they carry you at their on their heart. And many of them pray for you daily. And I am so thrilled with this church because in our church, currently, we are sponsoring 29 children. That's about 25% of our church is sponsoring a child. And that is unheard of. If a church sponsors 5% or 10%, it is amazing. So for 25%, it is incredible. So on behalf of those children, I want to say thank you. You are making a difference in a life. And I had the opportunity a few months ago to go to the Korean War Museum in Seoul. I don't know if you've ever had the chance to go. I went with a former colleague, a Korean colleague. And as we were walking around and we were looking at all the memorials, I was just saying to him, you know, Koreans have always been so amazing when it comes to giving. And sponsoring children, their numbers are so much higher than the rest of the sponsors. Why is that? And as we got to where they were remembering Ethiopia, he said, it's because we remember when we were going through a very difficult time, the 21 countries who came alongside us and helped us. And so because of that, now we want to give back and help others. And so he said, when the Ethiopia famine came, that's part of the reason why I was so passionate, because it was personal. My dad served as a student volunteer in the army during the Korean War. And these Ethiopians and many other countries were fighting alongside him. And so it was personal. So we have the opportunity to come alongside and give back and help others who are going through their darkest hours and most difficult times. And I had the opportunity a few years ago to go and visit one of my sponsored children in Brazil. And honestly, I had another sponsored child from Brazil previously. And we had the same birthday, and I had gone and celebrated our birthday together. And so she was such a special girl. And she went out of the program, and they sent me another child. And I really wasn't emotionally connected to that child because I had been sponsoring the other one for so many years. But one day I received a letter in the mail from my child, and it was actually one of her workers that works with her family. And they explained to me that my sponsored child's mother had cancer, and her health was very bad. And they didn't know if she was going to live or not live. And my sponsored child's father had already passed away. So here was this little 8-year-old girl who was already having to experience the loss of a father and now possibly a mother. And these words at the end of the letter are what stuck with me. It says, I believe that it was God who chose you for this important endeavor, which is to help to make this child happier. May God bless you and protect you. So I wanted to meet the mother, especially if there was a possibility she would pass away. And it was a very difficult journey trying to get out to where my child lives. She lives very far out in no man's land, we say. And I didn't even know if I was actually going to be able to visit her because of the challenges. But when I had gone through a cornfield, got to the end, here was this little girl jumping up and down. She was so excited, and she'd been standing outside waiting for me to get there. And I went inside and I met her sick mother. She was lying in a hammock in a darkened room because she can't be where there is light. And not long after meeting the mother, she became very sick and she started vomiting. And I wasn't sure what to do at that point. But I took the kids and went in the other room, and I started playing jump rope and frisbee with the kids in the house. And I know you're not supposed to play jump rope and frisbee in the house, but I thought maybe it would be okay. And a little while later, the mother came out and she sat in the corner and she watched us playing. And the kids were laughing. And because they were laughing, I tried to be funnier. And the mom, I noticed pretty soon in the corner, was laughing and laughing also. And she was covering her mouth and holding her stomach as she laughed, trying to hold the laughter in. And I remember seeing her as I was jumping rope, and it was the most precious sight ever. And all of the challenges up to that moment, it was worth it just to be there and to see that joy and laughter. And when it was time to go, my heart was breaking because here was this precious young family, and the oldest child was only 15 years old, and these kids may be orphans and at 8 years old. And I asked the family if I could pray for them before I left. And I prayed the mother would be, that her body would be healed. I prayed that she wouldn't be in pain. And I prayed that family and friends would surround these young children and love them and embrace them. And my heart cried because I couldn't change their situation. Only God can heal the mother. But at least I could bring hope and happiness for a short time. And as we were leaving, they told me that the teenage daughter that's 15, who's having to carry a lot of the weight of the family, that she was crying as I was leaving. And so, again, my heart was just broken. There are so many families who are going through such difficult times, and each child that you see, or each child on the sponsorship table, has a story, and the family has a story. They're real people, and when we hear those stories, our heart is broken. And so I want to thank each of you who are currently sponsoring a child. You are making a difference more than you will ever know. And you're bringing hope and happiness to that child. And if you're not sponsoring a child, or if you're able to sponsor a second child, I want to encourage you today to take this brochure you should have all received when you came in today. And inside is a form that if you can just take this out now and complete the form, after the service, if you can bring this form to the sponsorship table in the foyer, there are some children. You can choose a child today that you want to help, or if you just want to have a child sent to you in the mail, they will choose a child and send it to you. So please sponsor a child today and make a difference. And this was my child that I visited, and you can see the smile on her face. So please come and see me after the service in the foyer. Thank you.
Our pastors group also sponsors a child, and we enjoy doing that. But